Okay, you've written a piece of fiction, and now you want to share it with readers. I'm Eric Aldrich, and I teach writing and literature at Pima Community College in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm on sabbatical. For my sabbatical project, I'm compiling resources to help new writers learn the fundamentals of publishing their work. So if this sounds like you, please keep watching, and hopefully you'll find what I share helpful. So, if we're talking about publishing, a good place to start is to define what we mean by publishing. Publishing means that you are making your work public. You'll notice how they have the same root. Publishing means that you're taking your work and you're making it available to a broader audience. There are different ways of publishing. You can self publish your work, or you can go through what I would call a traditional publishing route. So, what is the difference? Self publishing means that you are responsible for making your work available to readers. It may take the form of posting your work on a website or blog. It may take the form of sharing your work on social media, or you may do it the old fashioned way with friends, get some paper and some glue and some scissors and a photocopy machine and make yourself a good old fashioned zine. When we talk about traditional publishing, what we mean is sharing your work with an editor who curates a press or a publication, meaning a magazine, journal, or website. For our purposes, I'm going to use the word magazine rather than journal. I think people that publish literary fiction tend to say journal, and people that write science fiction or genre fiction might be more likely to say magazine. I think more people understand what a magazine is, so I will generally say magazines and websites. And I'm going to start by talking about publishing short fiction. Publishing a novel or a longer work is a different process. So here I'm going to just talk about how can you publish a short story. So that's the basic fundamentals of the situation. Self-publishing means that you are responsible for finding your audience and finding the readers and sharing your work with them. Traditional publishing means that you will share your work with an editor, and if they choose to feature your work in their magazine or website, then that work will be exposed to the audience that follows that publication. Now that we have a definition for what it means to publish your work, let's look at some literary magazines and websites that feature short fiction and examine some of the common traits that many of them have, as well as some of the differences you might encounter as you explore the many publications that are out there sharing short fiction. So just before I get into the literary magazines and websites, I thought I would just quickly show you an example of a zine that I made. This is a story that I wrote and published several years ago. And to make a zine, I just downloaded a free formatting program from the internet, and I combined some pictures that I have taken over the years of abandoned houses with a story that I wrote, with the text of the story. It didn't take me very long, and now that I have this file, I can print out one of these for anyone I would like to share it with. It cost as much as it cost to use my printer and to buy some paper. Now on to literary magazines and websites. To get us started, I thought I would show you Kababi. Kababi is the literary magazine for faculty and staff at Pima Community College. In order to publish in Kababi, you have to be a member of the faculty or staff at PCC. The magazine comes out one time a year, and it features photography, art, short fiction, poetry, nonfiction, and it's full color. If you're a student at Pima Community College, you would publish in Sanskrit, which is the literary magazine exclusive for students. Kababi is edited by faculty and staff. Sanskrit is edited by students. And if you're interested in working with Sanskrit, there's a class that you can take. It's offered on our West Campus. If you're interested in submitting to Sanskrit, you can always find that information on the PCC website. Many literary magazines are associated with colleges and universities, and many literary magazines are published both in print and online. Oftentimes, if they're going to do both, they publish the print version first and then the online version somewhat later, but sometimes they also post them both at the same time. Another example of a college-based literary magazine is Weber, The Contemporary West, which is published in Ogden, Utah at Weber State University. This is similar to Kababi, but it accepts submissions from anyone all over the world, and it's not limited to any faculty, staff, or students at that college or university. As a matter of fact, my story, A Heliograph to King Kletso, was featured in this issue of The Contemporary West. In Tucson, here at the University of Arizona, we have the Sonora Review. And Sonora Review is published by the university. The editorial staff are graduate students, usually in the Masters of Fine Arts program in the English department. This one happens to contain Dr. Portreat's Dream, a story by my friend and fellow PCC faculty member, Frankie Rollins. Not all literary magazines and journals are published by colleges and universities. The ones that are generally are published twice a year, once per semester. Magazines that are not associated with colleges and universities may have different publication schedules and different submission windows. This is an interesting magazine called One Story. They have one story per issue. It's usually a longer story. They are an independent publishing outfit in New York. Similarly, Free State Review is published by Galileo Press. They have a slightly more traditional or common publishing format insofar as they publish fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. They are not associated with a college or a university. The same is true for American Short Fiction, which is based out of Austin, Texas. This one does not include poetry or nonfiction because it is American Short Fiction. And this one happens to be the Emerging Writers issue. When we are looking at websites, they are often set up in a similar way to a print magazine or journal, except that sometimes a magazine that's published online, a website, has more flexibility with their publishing schedule. So they may not be quarterly, they may not be biannual, or they may not be yearly. They may publish weekly or daily or on a rolling schedule. Magazines and websites sometimes have the same practices. They have an editorial staff that reviews submissions, and they have people who are responsible for the design. Someone has to do the design, the layout, and all that sort of work, whether it's an online publication or a print publication. Now that we have a better idea of the types of publications that feature short fiction, let's take a deeper look inside and see some of the sections and organizational structures you can expect to find as you explore literary magazines and websites. Let's start right with the cover. The cover of a print or ebook style magazine often features cover art that is designed to grab readers' attention and draw them in so that they want to read the poems, short stories, and nonfiction contained inside. For a website, the homepage functions both as the cover and as the launching point for reaching the other content on the site. Subscription information may be prominently displayed at the outset. Subscriptions are how the publication raises money to pay for operational costs and to pay writers who submit work to that issue. The About the Publication section may tell you something about that magazine or website's affiliation. It can tell you about its goals. It can tell you something about the type of literature it publishes. These can take different forms. The masthead features the names of the editors and other contributors who work to create the magazine or website. They may be detailed, or they may be just the names. Sometimes they include short biographies or overviews of the people working on that publication. This can be a place to find valuable information about who's involved in creating the work that you're reading or submitting to. Sometimes they feature a letter from the editor or editors at the outset, and it can tell you something about the editorial decisions and curatorial style that informed the decisions made in the particular issue that you are reading. Sometimes they also connect the content of the magazine to current events. Of course, the table of contents is generally displayed near the outset, and it tells you where to find each individual author's writing throughout that issue. For a website, the homepage may be the table of contents. Contributor information is sometimes contained in a separate section at the end of the magazine, and it may contain short bios of each writer. You are the one who provides that if you are the writer. Other times, that information is actually paired with the story, and you will find the bio or contributor information at the bottom of their story. An example from Clark's World here illustrates that. Of course, the submission guidelines are also something that are featured in a magazine or on a website. Sometimes they are separate from the magazine or website itself. For example, the submission guidelines for Sanskrit here. But they tell you all the necessary information that you need to submit your work to that publication. They'll tell you the number of words, the type of writing they're looking for, the genres they publish, and if it's art, they'll tell you the format of the art to submit. This is an essential page to get used to if you are someone who is interested in submitting your work to literary magazines and websites, because you need to follow these instructions if you have any hope of being successful and having your work featured. If you're a new writer who's looking to send their work out into the world, I hope you find this information helpful. In future installments, we'll look into the submission process in more detail. We'll ask questions like, why do you want to traditionally publish your work? And is your work ready to send out to an editor? We'll look at ways to find new literary magazines and websites to submit to, as well as look into the actual process of submitting in more detail. Of course, the information I've provided here about literary magazines and websites is valuable to you as a reader as well. The literary community needs readers just as much as we need writers. So I hope that the next thing you do after finishing this video is go find a new literary magazine or website, find an author you've never read before, and read their work. Thanks so much for watching.